Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UAP, UFO news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'd like to talk about a UFO photo that was taken by two British friends who vanished after a visit from two sinister men in dark suits. Since then, this photo has become a significant topic of conversation amongst ufologists and garnered worldwide attention. Here's a TikTok video that I found that summarizes it all.
UFO photos almost always look like they've been taken using a toaster. They're either super blurry or don't resemble UFOs at all. With that in mind, I'd like to present you with something absolutely incredible. A UFO photo that actually looks like it was taken using a functioning camera. Whoa! All jokes aside, this is the Calvine Photo, widely known as the clearest UFO snap ever taken. Captured in Scotland by two young chefs in 1990, the incredible image shows a strange diamond-shaped object flying in front of a conventional plane. The two chefs sent it to a newspaper, but instead of publishing it, the paper passed the image to the British Ministry of Defense, where it promptly disappeared for 30 long years. Then, in 2020, British academic journalist David Clarke finally tracked it down. After first hearing about the story in 2009, but without the photographic evidence itself, it had captivated him ever since. Eventually, he tracked down a former Royal Air Force officer who'd held on to a print of it. Apparently, the retired officer had been waiting for someone to call him about it for years, so was more than willing to share the pic. And unlike a lot of other UFO sightings, this one can't be easily debunked. Andrew Robinson, senior photography lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, analyzed the photo and concluded that whatever the object is, it's definitely there in front of the camera. So there's no editing trickery going on. The RAF officer that held onto it also said that when the photo was sent in, the witnesses claimed the craft made no noise whatsoever. Weird. Who the witnesses actually are, though, we don't know. Though the names of the original photos should have been released in 2021, British authorities have refused to do so until 2076, citing privacy concerns. Suspicious much?
So I had seen this photograph before, the Calvin incident photo, and thought it was very realistic looking, but never knew the story behind it. And then I started seeing stuff on social media about the Calvin incident. I found this on Reddit, and it's by r/aliens dmans99, and the heading reads, "Retired chef reveals his two workmates vanished after photographer captured 6 sensational images of Calvin UFO." So here's a third chef, I believe, that had been working with these two men that took the Calvin photo, that is coming out and making some sort of a statement. So I kept digging, and I found something else on social media on the dailymail.com about some recent developments. So this is an article on the dailymail.com. It's entitled, "Two British Friends Took This UFO Photo, Then Vanished After a Visit from Sinister Men in Dark Suits. Breaking his silence after 34 years, their old colleague now reveals what happened and says they were not meant to see it." And this is an article by Dr. David Clarke, who's been studying the Calvin photo for 15 years. He's a ufologist and also an investigative journalist. So I'll just read this very quickly. So it says here, at about 9 p.m. while walking in the glens in Calvin, these two men saw something that scared them out of their wits: a huge, solid, diamond-shaped object about 100 feet long, hovering silently in the sky over their heads. And I'm paraphrasing here just for expediency. Luckily, they had a camera with them and managed to capture some images. And this is one of them here, if you guys can see this. and they managed to capture some images as they cowered in the bushes. They'd taken these to the Daily Record, Scotland's largest circulation paper. I guess this is just one of the pictures that they took. The young men were excited and terrified in equal measure. This was dynamite. Had they seen a UFO? Were they going to be rich and famous? And as they chatted, the article goes on to say, a dark car pulled up outside the hotel, and two mysterious figures dressed in dark suits emerged from the back seat. They called to the two chefs by name. Okay, that's unusual. How would they know their names? And they're quoted as saying, cigarette breaks over, lads. One of them barked to the rest of the group, in you go and mind your own business. The pair were then led off somewhere for a chat. Two very different young men were on breakfast duty the next morning, as one of the original members of the group, retired chef Richard Grieve, tells me today. So Richard Grieve is talking to Dr. David Clark here about the incident because he knew these two men that took the photograph. The article says, breaking his silence after 34 years, Richard Grieve, now 55, spoke exclusively to the Daily Mail to describe what happened that mysterious night in 1990. The pair were visibly shaken by whatever was said to them, he remembers, though they refused to divulge specifics, saying only that the men were from the Royal Navy. Not long after that, it all went a bit hush-hush, and they started talking about being followed around. Okay? Their demeanor changed. They stopped showing up for work and went off the rails, and one began drinking heavily. He was sacked soon afterward. Okay? And the other, who was usually outgoing and larger than life, became introverted and sullen within a few months of the visit from the men in the car. They both left the hotel. I haven't seen them since. Okay, and the hotel, I guess, is where they were all working as chefs. Okay, so just going to read this last part here. Whatever it was they knew, they were not meant to see it. They never really talked about it, but one of them said it was the Americans. And here's a picture of what David Greaves looks like now at 55. He's breaking his silence after 34 years. He's now 55. And this incident took place in 1990. And back in 1990, this is what he looked like. So this is Dr. David Clark there on the right, who wrote this article and has been studying the Calvine photo for 15 years. And he's standing there with ex-RAF or Royal Air Force Press Officer Craig Lindsay. Dr. David Clark tracked the original picture to Craig Lindsay, who kept it hidden on a bookshelf for 32 years. And that's ex-Royal Air Force Press Officer Craig Lindsay right there on the left of David Clark. David Clark goes on to say in the article, when we spoke in 2002, Craig Lindsay, then in his 80s and still living in Scotland, confessed, quote, I have been waiting for someone to contact me about this for more than 30 years. How about that? And the article goes on to say, although he can't remember the exact names of his colleagues, the names Kevin Russell is written on the back of the black and white print that Craig Lindsay managed to keep hold of. Thank God that Craig Lindsay kept that photo and didn't hand it over. Craig Lindsay said he remembered it being sent by courier from the Daily Record to his office. The newspaper told him they were seeking comment for use in their exclusive story. Craig immediately faxed a copy of the print to the MOD's UFO desk in London. Craig couldn't recall any more details about the witnesses themselves, but he remembers their incredible story. So this is, I guess, what Craig Lindsay was told back in 1990 about what happened to these two missing British friends. This is his story. They told him that as they cowered in the bushes, they first heard and then saw a military Harrier jet. That must be the plane that is seen to the right of the Calvin UFO in the now iconic photograph. So they first heard and saw this military Harrier jet fly down the valley beneath the UFO. Then, as they fired off shots on their camera, they saw another jet return and circle around the UFO, as if the pilot was escorting it before departing. Then the diamond craft shot vertically into the sky and vanished without making a sound. Wow. So this UFO just shot straight up into the sky vertically, as a lot of them do on videos that I've seen on social media. Okay, so the David Clark article on thedailymail.com goes on to say Craig typed up a summary of their account and faxed it to the MOD. He also arranged for the Record to send the lad's negatives to London. Then he waited for the newspaper to publish its exclusive, but no story appeared. Craig says he was instructed to leave it to London, and for 32 years he did as he was told, but not before stashing one picture on his bookshelf. Thank God you did that, Craig. So Dr. David Clark says, for 18 months, I have been working with a documentary film crew to find the elusive Kelvin Russell. And that's the name that was written on the back of the one picture that Craig Lindsay kept. But in spite of worldwide publicity, no one has come forward to claim ownership of the photograph. David Clark says that the closest we've got was a Kevin Russell, who, according to the electrical roll, was working as a hotel kitchen porter a mile away at the time, but when approached, denied all knowledge of the picture. You know, that could very well be him. The original person that took this picture, one of them, they were both chefs. They were working in a kitchen, so it stands to reason that he might still be working in a kitchen. It could also be that Kevin is still frightened and doesn't want to come forward. Or David Clark says one thing his former colleague, Richard Grieve, is sure about. However, and Richard Grieve has leaked the information recently about what happened that night and who took the pictures. Richard Grieve is sure about that both the young men were very scared after their close encounter, both with the UFOs and the men in black. And David Grieve is sure they couldn't have made up the image as a hoax. During the tourist season, in the hotel where they worked 16-hour shifts and cooked for up to 150 guests, there was no time for hijinks, the article says. Officials say the negatives were returned to the newspaper, and the only records that survived have been transferred to the National Archives. Everything else has been destroyed. So where are the other images and negatives? What happened to Kevin Russell and his friend? But ever since the Calvine photo went viral on social media, the internet has been buzzing with theories. So a former Daily Record news editor, Malcolm Speed, cannot explain why his paper did not publish their exclusive. Speed remembers being shown the photographs by the picture editor, Andy Allen. In this article, he's quoted as saying, "It looked amazing then, and I was surprised it was not published." When I quizzed him about the photographs, Andy told me the RAF said they were fakes. So Andy Allen, the editor, died in 2007, so it's impossible to ask for his version of events. And as Malcolm Speed says, was Andy misled by the Royal Air Force? Even if they were fakes, why weren't they published? Doesn't make any sense. Dr. David Clark says, when I first started following up leads on the photographs, I was struck by the date of the sighting. So these two chefs got the photograph back in August the 4th, 1990. This was 2 days after Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait, triggering the first Gulf War. So for the rest of the year, thousands of military personnel and hundreds of ships and warplanes, including the futuristic American F-117A stealth fighter, were mobilized in the buildup to the aerial attack on Iraqi forces that began in January of 1991. The aircraft had been in development for at least 15 years, and some of the prototype designs, including one called the Hopeless Diamond. This Hopeless Diamond resembles the craft photographed in Scotland. So that could be a possible explanation. Also, earlier this year, the US government admitted it had flown prototype aircraft that resemble alien craft, some of which had been seen and reported as UFOs. The Pentagon said, quote, some of these systems had a saucer or triangle-shaped appearance and were capable of hovering aloft. So I wonder, was the Calvine UFO one of them? So the American Department of Defense's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO as it's commonly known here in the States, has a mission from Congress to resolve unexplained UFOs. It released its first volume of its historical investigation this past February, and it says all the evidence about UFO sightings points to misidentified, authentic, highly sensitive national security programs. The declassified version also refers to a sighting in the 1990s when an unnamed military witness saw a UFO exhibiting a peculiar flight pattern near a U.S. military facility, possibly Area 51, the top secret military base in Nevada desert, where experimental aircraft and weapons systems are thought to be researched. Could this be what the chefs saw over Calvine? So if aircraft have been in development for the past 15 years that resemble the diamond-shaped craft taken in the Calvine photo, and the government has admitted that they have prototype aircraft that resemble this craft and have been mistaken for UFOs, could the Calvine UFO be one of these prototypes? This is a sort of a cigar-shaped aircraft that the Air Force is looking at now and working with. And this is a post that I found on X, and it says that this photo is of a UFO research which crashed in the USA, Texas, in 1992. This is something that DARPA is working on now. It's a secretive manta ray program, and it's unveiling this prototype. It's an unmanned underwater vehicle, or a UUV. And this is this picture was taken during one of its first trials near Southern California. It's a massive autonomous submersible manta ray. So I guess what people are calling USOs. Is another shot of the manta ray from behind. They're still doing in-water testing off the coast of Southern California. It's the first of its kind. It's an extra-large uncrewed underwater vehicle. Here's a bigger shot of it. And here's something else that I have no information on this, but this is another vehicle that the government is using as a prototype or working with as a prototype. I'd like to end by showing a video from the History Channel. So the two men that took the photograph in that video are referred to as hikers. Those are the two chefs that took the photograph, and they took 6 altogether, 5 of which are still being searched for by Dr. David Clark, the ufologist and investigative journalist. And the one that has been circulating on social media, the iconic Calvine photo, was revealed by the retired Royal Air Force press officer, Craig Lindsay. And thank God that he stowed that away. And after 30 years, he finally revealed it. So what happened to the 2 men that took the photograph? Have they been sworn to secrecy forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement? Was the Calvin UFO an experimental prototype craft that the Pentagon was flying over Scotland? All that remains to be answered. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And let's try and manifest a positive shield of protection for all the kids over war-torn Gaza and Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you all for listening to my podcast.